A friend of mine, Lynch Butler, he went to New York one time. He was a VP at Simmons at one point, and while he was there, he had got sent to New York, and he was trying to find this place. And he was looking for Puberty Street. And so he pulls into this gas station, and he proceeds to walk up to the person, and he begins to ask him, I need to find out where this street is, And the guy's talking kind of funny, and let's see, the name of the street is, hang on, because the guy said it funny, and that's what I'm thinking. I can't get it changed the other way. Hang on. Man, I just blew that story all to pieces. It happens. You ever have a bad story time? Story time with Mike. Dang it. What is it? Anyway, Lynch stopped and asked for the street. P something. And the guy goes, "You looking for Puberty Street?" And he goes, "No, not puberty. I'm looking for, And he goes, "Puberty." And he goes, "No, I'm not looking for Puberty Street." And anyway, neither one could communicate, and so he just left. And he just kept driving around until he finally figured out what he was looking for and found it. Marcia said growing up in South America, if you stopped and asked for directions, they would give you directions. Even if they didn't know what you were talking about or where it was, they would give you directions because they didn't want to look bad. Sometimes they just send you off. Wouldn't that be kind of crazy, right? You ever been driving and end up in the bad part of town? Did that once with a youth group in downtown Kansas City, Kansas. That's where you got lost. And I'm telling the students, no hand motions, no gestures, don't yell out the window, please. Because when we had got to the parsonage, and we're talking to the pastor, he goes, there were 3 shootings this weekend 2 blocks over. I'm going, where did my pastor send me? Because he set up the trip. I'm going. And then he proceeds to tell me, that's when AIDS really started coming out. And he goes, they haven't proven that you can't get AIDS from the water, and Kansas City is one of the, and I'm like, thanks a lot. You're really just trying to scare me, aren't you, Actually, what was more scary was the way he ate pancakes. He put a fried egg on top and then dumped applesauce all over it. To me, that was kind of scary. So, we've been talking about, we just started last week a series called Destinations, right? Something like that. You know what this is, right? What kind of book? It's a map book, right? It's a book of maps. An atlas. There you go. That's cool. I need to bring my Harley one. I got a Harley one. That's kind of cool too. This one's Colorado Ski Atlas and Winter Guide. So, winter recreation guide. I put that away. People don't use this much anymore. Do you notice that? Because of these, right? Isn't that kind of wild? And so, remember when TomToms came out? And they would tell you turn here and recalculate and all this stuff. And one time I looked up a map, I thought, I'm going to try this on a ski trip. I'm going to find out what the fastest way is to Aspen, Colorado. That's where our ski trip was. And so I thought, because people kept telling me, you just need to take Highway 412 straight out and then go straight up, and that's the shortest route. And then people say, no, the shortest route is to go up through Wichita and on into Salina and then head over to Denver and then go, And somebody else said, no, you need to go up toward Wichita and then take 50 across, and that'll put you out of Pueblo and then go up. And so I had these 3 different, I'm going to type in and see which one. And this MapQuest sent me on roads. I mean, they did do the shortest route, but they were dirt roads, farm lanes, and a couple of passages in Colorado that you could only do a certain time of the year because it was all melted off. So I was like, well, that's not going to do me any good. So now what do? I just drive the way I want to drive. I'll take 50, I'll take 412, I'll take, the interstate. Interstate's the fastest. To me, 412 is more scenic. 50 just smells because of the cattle lots, stock lots all the way through there. So anyway, we're looking at the idea, the principle of the path. And tonight, we're going to look at something about where we're going. You ever been to a place and you walk up to this little kiosk thing and it says, "You are here"? And I always wondered, how did it know I was here? And then it would show you, different places and how to find them, right? You go to the Pinnacle Mall, you walk out there, one of the sidewalk things has a little sign there, kiosk, says, "You're here." And then you can look up the destination store that you want to go to. So a lot of us look at life as the idea, we want to end up here. But the road that we got on to get there, the direction that we were going, is not going to get us to that destination. You've had friends, right, talk to you about their stories, somewhere that they wanted to go, but when they begin to tell you the road that they got on, you're going, that's not the destination, that's not the road that you think is going to get you there, right? As we've talked about, if you want to go to the Gulf, you don't get on I-49 and go north, right? You've got to get on I-49 and go what? What way? South. So we've looked at the idea that direction, okay, not intention, determines the destination. And so tonight, we're going to look at another proverb that Solomon had given us. I think that is very good for us to look at when we talk about being on the path. Now, last week, we looked at the story that Solomon told his sons about a wayward youth, okay, that didn't have any experience and, was simple, and he was caught by the adulterer as a deer was caught in a fast and pierced, as an ox to slaughter, as a bird in a snare. In other words, the path that he was going by her house was not going to lead him to the destination that he thought he was going to get. And so again, we're going to look at the idea that this whole foundation is based upon a Psalms 119. And so I want to encourage you, I forgot to mention this to the Sunday morning crowd last week, but I want to encourage you to read Psalms 119 and reread Psalms 119. Or if you have your phone, and you have the Bible app on there, the YouVersion, it'll actually read it to you. That's what I do in the truck. I just keep listening to it over and over. Before I know it, I'm at Psalms 150, and I went, wait a minute, I got to go back to Psalms 119, listen to that again. And so last week we looked at Psalms 119, and the key verse for us that we're going to look at is God's Word is a lamp unto our what? Feet, and a light unto our path. And so the whole idea, the synopsis is that God spun this world into motion. He created us in His image, and He knows the path that we should walk. Now, I did have an interesting discussion, and let me do this as a side note. I was talking to a young man, and I was asking him, so what are your goals, and what are your, what's your direction? Where are you going in life? And because, if I'm going to help you in any way, I need to know which way to kind of show you which way to go. And he said, well, I want to get married, and I want to marry the right woman. And I'm like, okay, time out. You're not going to marry the right woman that'll fix you. I said, you got to be the right man that she wants to marry. You've got to put some, because he thought, God knows who I'm going to marry. God knows my next steps. God's already directed everything, right? I even had a conversation with a guy and said, God knows when I'm going to die, so it doesn't matter what I do now. And somebody said, well, you can tempt fate, right? Or tempt God to take you out of, it's like, he's like, well, what do you think? And I thought, if I wanted to end my life now, I could end my life now. If God wanted to stop it, He could stop it. But He also gives us a free will. If I wanted to commit suicide, I could do it. It's not like I want to, okay, God, is this the time? That's really not what we're talking about. The whole idea is that God does allow us to go down paths that we choose to go down. Can He divert your path? Sure. I am so thankful that my youth pastor's father was chased by the cops into a hotel parking lot where he snuck into the hotel and he found a Gideon Bible and he changed the direction and course of his life. Because later his son, who was born to him, helped change the direction and course of my life. So God can intervene. God does step in and, have you ever prayed God to protect you? Right? And then at times God doesn't protect you and you kind of go, all right, God, where were you? When I got hit in the head with that limb, or that tree that fell and stuff, I've been cutting trees since I was 12. I'm 51. You can do the math. And I have never had an injury like that in the logwoods. I've never had stitches before from logging, okay? I've never broken a bone from logging. I've had all my fingers and toes. And when I see other logging crews and things that they post and things that have happened to them, I'm like, I'm so thankful that even though I ended up with 13 staples, I didn't go, all right, God, where were you? Yeah, because it could have been another way. It could have been so many times. So many different things, so many different ways and paths and all this stuff. And we kind of throw up our hands and go, okay, God, wait a minute. If you're in control, why don't you just take control? But that's not fair either, right? We're not puppets on a string that God moves us and plays with us wherever He wants and does whatever He wants with us, correct? You're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to do what you want to do. Some of you are going to do it because you want to do it. Some of you are going to do it because God's gifted you with that and you think this is the best way for me to exercise the tools, the experiences, and my abilities to do what God has designed me to do so that it can give Him the glory of being the creator that He is. Not because He's stuck up and He's proud and He wants to show off. It's the idea that He gets a pleasure out of seeing things that He's created work to the best of their ability. Guys, if you ever work on a car or a small engine and you get it running right, doesn't that excite you? And when it's not running right, doesn't that frustrate the far out of you? If you take your car to a mechanic and you tell them to fix it and they give it back to you and say it's fixed and you drive down the road and it's not, you get really frustrated, don't you? But don't we do the same thing to God? When we think, God, you've got this, and we go to, and everything's still messed up, and we go, God, what's going on? Well, here's what I find in Proverbs chapter, let's see if I got it here on this. You may have to do this. I don't know if I've got it right. Yeah, I do have it. Okay. It says here, a Proverbs written by Solomon, and he says this, the prudent. Who are the prudent? What's a prudent person? A wise person. Okay? A person who has evaluated their experiences and they have learned from them. So they have the knowledge and they have the experience, and then when they've evaluated the experience, they know the best way to use their knowledge. The prudent, when they see danger, what do? What does it say they do? When they sees danger and hides himself. Okay? Now, the rest of the verse says, the simple, or your translation may say, the foolish go on and suffer what? For it. Or because of it. Maybe another translation. So Solomon is saying this. If you are wise, When you see danger coming, what do? You get out of the way. You prepare for it. You know, it's like, for me, in the logwoods, and some of you may understand this, you may not, but hopefully it'll get the point across. When we bring somebody new on, or somebody is working with us, you know, even for a while, and I tell them to work around one of the machines, I always tell them, the operator in the machine does not see you. You need to watch that machine and that operator and stay out of his way, because he will not see you. Some of you remember Eric Ecklev, our youth pastor that came from JBU. He grew up in Chicago, and his dad worked for Granger, an office job. His mom was a children's minister, and he grew up in the suburbs, never had any farm experience, never had any logging experience, never ran a chainsaw, and he came to work for us. I offered him the position and said, I could use you if you want to learn, and he seemed to have the aptitude to learn, and he did a great job. And today's his birthday, so we should spank him. We should call him up and say happy birthday to him. So we were logging this track in the edge of Oklahoma, and I told him from the very beginning, the guy in the skidder can't see you. And then Ryan came to work for us, and we got a bigger skidder and had a better cage on it and stuff, and we're logging this place, and Danny and Eric are carrying their chainsaws, and they're cutting, and the story goes that Eric needed Ryan to come over and pull this tree or do something. And so, again, I've told Eric time and time again, the skidder operator cannot see you. And so he tells Ryan and he walks away, but he's walking with the skidder. And the skidder hits this little sapling, and it just slaps him, you know, just like a woman slapped you across the face. And it made Eric so bad. He ran up into that skidder trying to open the door, but you couldn't open the doors from the outside. There was a trick. And he's like, if I could get in there, I would whoop him right now, you know. I'm just laughing. And Danny stopped him and said, what are you doing? Haven't we told you that you need to watch for the machine because he cannot see? He doesn't know what he did. And unfortunately, there was a crew just this last month over by Lake Uchi, over in that area, was logging a new crew, inexperienced, and a guy got killed because the skidder was coming by and it knocked a dead tree down and it landed right on this guy. The prudent, when they see danger, they hide from it. Now, this is not like an ostrich putting his head in the sand and going, I don't see no, you know, and it's not like I don't see no evil, I don't see no evil, you know. It's not like they lock themselves into a room, because you can't do that if you want to experience life the way God wants you to experience. It'd be like the old movie, I think it was John Travolta was in it, The Man in the Bubble. You remember that boy in the bubble? We can't go through life wrapping ourselves with bubble wrap. You cannot go through life and not get hurt. There are life experiences that unfortunately happen to people, and you can't control it. You want to. You can take every effort to make sure you're doing everything according to plan and to reason and to be safe. And so when you see it coming, the prudent hide. Now, maybe I'll put it like this. Some of us older men in the room, I pulled up in a 63 Chevy truck. The dash on that is solid what? Metal. I rode in that truck with my grandpa. And when he hit the brakes and I hit the dash for the first time, that left a mark. But you know what? After that moment, anytime he went to hit the brakes, I prepared. Put a hand up, you know. Parents, you ever been driving with your kids and all of a sudden you have to slam on your brakes, and where does your arm go? I was doing this with Aaron we were in Glorieta. Yeah, we were in Santa Fe, and on a Christmas break, and it was just a family, and we needed to get away, and I took the kids skiing. And Ryan and Lene and I had always wanted to learn to snowboard. And so here was the perfect time, because when we were with a group, they would get frustrated because they knew how to ski really well. And so they would lead the pack, and they would lead groups with them. But when they tried snowboarding, it was like learning all over again. It's beginning. And so they didn't like it because they couldn't help other people. And so since it was just family, I thought this would be great. We'll all get snowboards and we'll practice, because we need a good 3 days under us, and then we'll be able to keep up with everybody and help them out. And so always with Aaron, he was, he's 6 years younger, and so he was little. He could ski. He didn't want to snowboard. He didn't want to stay on his skis. This is like the second, third time he'd been skiing. So as a good parent, every time I got on the ski lift, I'd always do that. Made sure he was on, and typically would take my ski pole and put it in the seat as a seat belt, for him to ride out. Santa Fe that year had excellent snow. It was like 16 degrees outside. They'd had over 2 foot of snow in the last 24, 48 hours, and the place was just packed. We couldn't get skis and snowboards for the first day. We had to wait a day and wait for somebody to turn them back in so we could get them for the rest of the ski trip. And so we're skiing the last day, and as a snowboarder, the way my feet were in the snowboard, I'd always have to get in on the left side, and Aaron would get in on the right, and I could put my hand like that and do it. One time we got mixed up in the line, and Aaron was on my inside, so wasn't thinking anything about it. We get on the ski lift, and I reached like this, but as you see, my body turned, and the snowboard turned, and it caught the edge of the snow. And that's how you turn a board and a ski, is with the edges. And when that caught, it's like a brake. And so it flipped up, and the snow was so high that there wasn't any room between the seat that I was sitting on the lift and the board. And the board was only a foot wide. And when it flipped up, it hit the seat. It didn't stop. It flipped me straight out and ran me over. And I'm scooting out of the way, and they don't stop the lift. It keeps going, and there's little Aaron riding off into the, and then I get on the lift, and who do I get on with? The guy that's been ski patrol his whole life, beginning to instruct me on what I needed to do. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. When you see danger, you prepare. You should have an emergency kit in your house. You should have a flashlight. You should have an AM, FM, battery-operated radio. Do not rely on your cell phone. If electricity goes out, your cell phone will be no good if it affects the phone system, which runs on electricity. They're actually trying to figure out how to, they're setting up ham radios now from Northwest Arkansas to Little Rock. In case of tornado, emergency, or ice storm, or things like that, to shut the whole area down, that they'll be able to communicate with one another through generated power in ham radio, so they can reach further distances. So you should have a flashlight, you should have candles, you should have a heat source, you should have, if you have a generator or whatever, be able to hook up to your house. You should have a first aid kit. How many of you have a first aid kit at home? You should. If you want to be sewed up, talk to Robert. He's got good experience with that. I've even seen him watch the doctors do it, And so the whole idea is you should, and this may be better, translation of this. The prudent sees danger and prepares himself. He doesn't just step into it. You see, the simple, the inexperienced, or the foolish guy says, oh, I see it, but it's not going to affect me the way it affects everybody else. That's what a fool says. A fool says, yeah, that always happens to them, but it'll never happen that way to me because I'm better. I know what I'm doing. I can handle myself. And what happens? They suffer. And everybody laughs at them. And it makes America's Funniest Home Videos. I mean, it's things that people will look at and go, oh, well, that'll never bother me. That'll never affect me. That'll never... And so when you think about this, in relationship to destinations, it applies in relationships. Relationships are always moving. They have momentum. When you meet somebody for the first time and you find something in common, then you begin to talk and the relationship moves. It builds and it grows. Or it stops and it doesn't just grow stagnant, it literally moves backwards. So relationships are constantly moving forwards or backwards. It could be as simple as coworkers going out, for a drink. And then it moves, maybe it's a late night business meeting. And then it moves on to drinks after work. And then it moves on to a meal. And then it moves on to, it's always moving. Or maybe a marriage that they're not spending the time anymore. They're not doing date nights, and they're not working at the relationship. And what's happening? It's moving backwards. They quit talking. They quit sharing, details. They quit, and it's just moving backwards. I knew a couple one time that they didn't speak to each other for 2 years. And they lived in the same house. And you think, how would that happen? But it does. We may do it to our friends. They may do something to... You remember growing up and you liked this girl or you liked this guy and you kind of went out, you went go together or whatever you called it, going steady. And when you broke up, you were mortal enemies. And you were wondering why. I had this girl one time on the school bus. She liked me, said she liked me. And I thought, hey, any girl that likes me, awesome. Didn't have to ask. I thought this is great. Then one day, she broke up with me. And after that, she hated me, hated my guts. We didn't go on one date. We just rode the bus together. Thinking, how could you hate me? I didn't do anything. Maybe that's why she hated me. I don't know. But see, relationships are always moving. Relationships are based on where they're going, not where they are. You value and you base relationships on where they're going, not where they are. You may come home and she says, we should go see somebody to help us with our marriage. And you're like, but we haven't argued for at least a couple of days. She goes, yeah, because you've been gone. You've been gone on a trip for the last 2 days. No wonder we haven't argued. You know what's interesting? When you look at relationships in the way that they move, it's like getting lost. You just don't know all of a sudden that it's lost, that you're lost. You don't know all of a sudden that, the relationship is broken. It's not like you stepped across the line and said, oh, that's bad. Okay, now we're good. I just backed up a step. No. It's little increments at a time that eat away at the relationship. The lack of communication, the lack of trust. It's so interesting. As I meet more and more couples, when we go through premarital counseling, and I talk to them about their sexual relationship, and they ask me why. Some do. Some are just like, really? Is he talking to us about this? I'm the preacher. God created it. That's usually what I tell them. When they have misused that part of their relationship before time, I have noticed it plants a seed of distrust into each person, with the question that's always in the back of their mind. They may never say it, they may never talk about it, but there's always this question in the back of their mind. if he did this with me before we got married, what's going to keep him from doing it with somebody else? If she did this with me before we got married, what's going to keep her from doing it with somebody else? And that always looms in the back of their mind, and distrust begins to grow like an acorn that fell underneath the sidewalk when they were making it, and then it germinated and it found its way through a crack. And over the years, what's going to happen to that sidewalk? It's going to bust all up. The only way to deal with it is to confess it. Is to confess it to God, to confess it to one another, and to seek forgiveness. And it's not just about going, I'm sorry, let's not do that again. Because it's like, you are sorry, and you will do it again. The only way to keep anything like that from destroying your relationship is to confess it and get on the right track. Stop and ask for direction so you can change, so you can be better. I've taken couples married after many years and literally have taken them back to where that started, and they've never confessed it. They've never talked about it, but it's ate at and destroyed their relationship with one another. And help them to go through a process of what it means to forgive one another. Just like God forgives us. And you know what happens? It begins to flower and it begins to grow. Because relationships are always moving, forward or backwards. Habits have a tendency sometimes to control relationships in a negative manner or in a positive manner. So it's a change. You know, finances are always moving, right? In an area of life. You're either getting more or you're losing more. Finances are always moving. And if I could tell you anything about finances, it wouldn't be give more to the church, okay? It would be this. The borrower is a slave to who? The lender. And you know what? That's another proverb. And it's not like he says, don't ever borrow. He just says, for a wise man, a borrower is a slave to the lender. You know that God wanted the nation of Israel, and he talks about this specifically. I didn't put it up here. You can look it up. You can read your Bible. He wanted the nation Israel to specifically be a lending nation, not a borrowing nation. He wanted Israel to be a lending nation, not a borrowing nation. Because a borrower is a slave to the lender. And my dad taught me this principle. I borrowed some money from him once. And I went to pay it back. And he goes, oh no, you're not going to pay it back. Oh, but I've got the money, I can pay you back. No, I want you to work it back. Because that's worth more to me to work it back. I'm a grown man. I'm married. And he wouldn't let me pay him cash back. I had to clock in the hours at the mill. And you know what that made me do? I don't want to borrow money. Not unless I have to. And at times I borrowed money and I was like, man, I wish I hadn't have done that. But there were times I borrowed money and it's, I knew what I was getting into. It took all of the account. And still, I can tell you this, you're still a slave to the lender. You got to pay it back. There is no free lunch, right? So think about this. I have 3 things for you. In understanding how a prudent person, a wise man, sees danger and prepares himself for it, and how the simple, they just go on and suffer for it. If you want to be wise and prepare yourself for it, you need, number 1, you need to take action. Okay? You need to take action. Because look at this. You have to do something. You can't keep doing nothing. ignoring it does not make it go away. We all know that. We just wish it would work more often, right? I mean, there are times that you just ignore it and you just, I don't want to talk about it right now. I don't want to talk about it ever. But you have to do something. If it's an addiction, you have to make some changes. You got to change your path. You may have to, do some things. You may have to work harder. You may have to work smarter. You may have to talk. But you need to do something. Make a plan. Set a goal. Ask for directions. The second thing is that you're going to have to sacrifice something. You're going to have to sacrifice something. You're going to have to quit something, or you're going to have to give up something. If your destination is this, you're going to have to sacrifice something to get there, right? I mean, it's just not all Cheerios and balloons, people. And the road is not always an interstate. As a logger, the best trees grow in the deepest, hardest places to get. Because nobody's touched them. Nothing has affected it. It's got protection all around it because it's in a deep, dark, watery hole. You have to sacrifice something to get to it. You have to give up something to make it better. You may have to give up your internet. You may have to turn off the TV. When Marcia and I first got married, we were reading through a book written by Dr. Wheat. He was a physician in Springdale. Great physician. He actually wrote Intended for Pleasure, which is one of the first Christian handbooks on the sexual experience that even other doctors and other sex experts use as a manual from a Christian doctor's perspective. In one of his books called Love Life, he said, the couple, when you get married, you should not have a TV for the first year. And Marcia and I talked about this, and we decided, you know what? I think that's a good idea. If we want to watch TV, we could go to somebody else's house and watch TV. And that would help us out in ministry, because we were making friends and influencing people. We went 3 years without a TV. And I didn't miss it. Now, growing up, I was watching TV. I mean, when we quit work and we went to the house, the TV was the first thing on. I had a neighbor one time, they never turned the TV off. It's always on. This blue hue, was always in their house. Because one night I passed by and it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, Tanya, were you up watching TV all night? She's like, no. I said, somebody in your house was watching TV all night. She goes, what do you mean? Were you at my house? I said, no, I drove by and I could tell your TV was on through the front window, when I drove by your house, because she was right on the road. And she was one of my students, and she goes, no, we never turn our TV off. I'm like, seriously? You never turn it off? No. Dad says it wears out the switch. That's before remote control, people. All right? But seriously, they never turned it off. They had to have the noise on to sleep, to live, to watch. But we went without TV for 3 years. Actually, when Ryan was born, Marcia was like, we're going to have to get a TV. Because him or I are not going to survive. So we got a TV. And then you know what? Lunchtime became days of our lives and all my children, right? I'd go home for lunch, and she would be watching. And when growing up, the kids would go If they wanted my attention and the TV was on, it was, Dad, I'm talking to you, It was a distraction. And there were times it's like, we just need to quit. We just need to shut it off. We need to give up something. We need to move on. And then the third thing is this. It's going to be embarrassing. Because people won't understand. Growing up, when I was doing marijuana, and I was hanging out with my cousins, because that's where we got it from. They grew it. We would make fun of our friends who turned to Christianity. We'd make fun of those people who gave it up and went to the dark side. We made fun of those people. It's embarrassing. Because you may have to give up some friends. That may be part of the sacrifice. You may have to change something, and people go, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. But for you, it does. And it may be embarrassing at first to tell the story. But later, it comes into play. How does this play out? Look at Psalms 119, verse 9. How can a young man keep his way pure? How can a young man keep his way pure? By what? What does it say? By guarding, right? By guarding it according to what? Not according to what your teacher said. Not according to what the media is trying to tell you. Not according to your friends. You need to have a measure. You need to have a stature. You need to have something that is solid that you can get your direction from. It was so cool when we went to the Bahamas on a mission trip. We were in this sailboat, and we were sailing one night. And we were kind of in an area, there was islands and stuff, and he was kind of watching where we were going. The captain knew where we were and where we were going, but he let us drive the boat. Now think about this. I told you last week I went to an area where I had walked my whole life in the mountains. And I took a group, and they wanted to hike there, and I was getting lost because the path wasn't the same. And we ended up making a circle back, almost, not back to the car, but we were heading back that direction. Imagine being out of the ocean in a boat at night and trying to figure out where you're going. And if you're staying in the same direction. And he said, I can tell you how to do it. I was like, please. Because this is kind of sketchy. And he goes, you find you a star. And you put that mask on that star. In other words, the direction you're going now, he goes, you're heading the right direction, so look up that mask and you find a point and you stay on it. How do farmers make straight rows in Kansas, in South Dakota, where the fields are as far as you can see? They do that, GPS now. But how did they do it 20 years ago? It wasn't just holding the wheel straight. Because if their tractor's like what I grew up on, that wheel's always moving. One of Marcia's family said, and he farms 38,000 acres in Cheyenne, Oklahoma. He goes, you find you a point all the way across. And you stay on it. Whatever your destination is. Psalms 119:9 says, how can a young man keep his way pure? If that's his destination, he's got to guard it, not according to what society says, Not according to what his friends say, not according to the media, but according to whose word? Because you can trust God's word, right? Why can you trust God's word? But it's an old book. It's prudish. It doesn't make sense. But what if you don't have faith? You said it never changed, right? It's the same yesterday as it is today. You know, my grandfather used to say stuff and I was going, no, you don't know what you're talking about. 30 years later, you know what? He knew exactly what he was talking about. You know, some things never change. The words may be a little old-fashioned, but the principle is what? It's still the same. Look at the next verse. The writer here is saying, with my whole what? Heart. My whole being. With my whole life. I do what? I seek you. My destination is I'm going to seek who God is. And then what does he say? If I'm seeking you, God, let me not what? Don't let me get distracted off the path. Don't let me turn aside. I know my front end's out of alignment, but please help it stay on course where it needs to be going. Let me not wander from your what? Commandments. Even for people who don't have the faith, for even people who don't believe in God, you know what's interesting? They still believe, do not murder. Right? They still believe that it's not right to murder somebody else. They still believe it's not right to steal, especially from them. Even if they want to steal from somebody else, but if you steal from them, it's still what? Wrong. So he says, with my whole heart, I'm going to seek after you. And please don't let me wander. For I have stored up your what? You don't need to rely on your phone. You don't need to rely on your Bible. You need to store it up. Okay? Store it in my heart that I may not what? Sin against who? God. You know what's interesting about this? If you don't sin against God, you don't sin against your neighbor. If you don't misuse what God said, you won't misuse your neighbor, your family, your friends. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me a verse that you know. All right? I'll give you a few seconds. John 11:35 is out of question. I already got that one. Jesus wept. All right? Okay, what is it? Put you on the spot. For God? Yeah. All right. What else? What do you got? A verse. Okay. Awesome. Another one. Yep. Good. Another one. What's your verse? Come on, people. What's a verse? You're like, I know verses, but now they're all gone. I can't think of one to put me on the spot. Okay, Romans 3:23. Romans 6:23. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is what? Awesome. Romans 10:9. If we can. Yeah. Romans 10:10. For it's with our heart that we believe and are made right. It's with our mouth that we confess and are saved, right? You see, it's not just reading your Bible. It's seeking it. And seeking it and hiding its words in your heart, in your whole being, will help you to see danger. And it'll help you to prepare for it. Here's your prayer. Ask God to help you see danger when it's coming and to know what to do. I didn't plan to share this, but I think I need to, if I can. In 2003, we had a wreck. Our van flipped. A lot. Right before it happened, I woke up. I'm not a seatbelt guy, so don't get me, but I was laying between the doors of the van that opened and closed. I was laying down there, and I woke up and I said, Vester, do I need to trade with Mike, who had been driving more than Vester? Vester had only been driving a couple hours. And do I need to trade? Because I'm awake now, I'm good. And he goes, no, we're going to stop for fuel up here at the next town. And I saw the sign, it's about 30 miles to Hays, Kansas. I thought, okay. So I laid back down. And I just prayed, Lord, keep Mike safe. Keep him awake. Please don't let anything bad happen on this trip. Just praying. And the next thing I know, we hit something. And it begins to roll. And I start grabbing people. I do that arm thing, I'm like. And immediately I go into this mode of, is everybody all right? And I'm going around, I'm checking everybody out. And trying to assess the situation and trying to do, how did I know how to do that? Because I'd been in situations, not exactly like that. And I'd been around death because I'd lost a sister. And I understood that at this moment, and it was also an act of God working through me, but the whole idea was that I had been prepared for that situation. I didn't like the situation. I hated the situation. And I also figured when I got back, being the responsible person I was, I probably needed to give up my position because something bad happened. And a couple of friends died on this trip. So I was ready to, whatever needed to be done, I would step down or do whatever. And several people came to me, and parents, and said, I am so glad that you were there and that you helped everybody through. And it just kind of set me back. I just really didn't know how to respond. But over time, understanding that God prepared and God used. And so when bad things happen, I don't normally just flip out and lose control. To the point my own brother-in-law said to Marcia, does Mike ever get mad? She's like, oh yeah. Because I went down to pick him up one time in a truck, and we blew 4 trailer tires on the way back and twisted a driveline. And I just would work through the situation and work through the situation and work through the situation. And because I typically pray, okay, God, what do you got? What do I need to do? How do I need to act? What do I need to respond? So pray this prayer. God, help me to see danger. Help me to see danger coming and prepare for it. Help me to be wise when danger is coming. Because I don't want to be simple. I don't want to be foolish. And you know what's interesting? Is that God will not only help you see it, He will prepare you. And what will prepare you is those words hidden in your heart. That's why, for me, Revelations 12 says, they've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. In other words, His story. When I get to share His story, I'm overcome. I realize I've overcome. Because confession makes us strong. It helps us to deal with it, and it helps us to keep moving in the right direction and not get swayed, not turned away, not drift off the path, but stay focused because we got that point that we see. And we keep our eye on it, and we keep going that direction. And you know what that does? That gets you to the point of where you hear these words. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Let's pray.